to Jesus. They acknowledged God's justice, having been baptized with the baptism of John. John's baptism was in effect authoritative at that time. And verse number 30, but the Pharisees and the lawyers rejected God's purpose. So we know that there were Pharisees who were also listening to Jesus as he had been speaking about John. And I think it's interesting that they had rejected God's purpose, not having been baptized by John. And so what Jesus does next, beginning in verse number 31 through verse number 35, Jesus is going to speak about that generation and what they are like. And he says, they're like children who sit in the marketplace and call to one another, and they say, we played the flute for you, and you did not dance. We sang a dirge, and you did not weep. For John the Baptist has come eating no bread and drinking no wine, and you say he has a demon. The Son of Man has come eating and drinking, and you say, behold, a gluttonous man and a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and sinners. Yet wisdom is vindicated by all her children. And this takes us to the main context of what we're going to look at here. Look at verse number 36. Now, one of the Pharisees was requesting him to dine with him. What's this Pharisee's name if you've already looked at the parable? Simon. Yeah, that's exactly right. Can you name any other Pharisees that's mentioned in the New Testament? Paul. Who? Gamaliel. Anyone else? Nicodemus, yeah. So we have some examples of other Pharisees that are mentioned by name. And so we have this particular Pharisee here in verse number 36. And one of the Pharisees was requesting him to dine with him, and he entered the Pharisee's house and reclined at the table. And so that gives us some background information. And notice the setting here. Jesus is going to get this invitation by the Pharisee, and throughout the Gospel of Luke, if you look over in Luke chapter 11 and verse number 37, and there's a couple of other examples as well. In Luke 11 and verse 37, now when he had spoken, a Pharisee asked him to have lunch with him, and he went in and reclined at the table. And so throughout the Gospel of Luke, we find other examples of Jesus eating with the Pharisees. We know that the Pharisees and the scribes and the lawyers would often be looking closely at Jesus, trying to trap him or trying to create some kind of problem. But here we just have this invitation of this Pharisee by the name of Simon requesting Jesus to come to dine with him. And he entered the Pharisee's house and reclined at the table. And there was a woman in the city who was a sinner. In the margin of my Bible, I'm reading from the New American Translation, it says, an immoral woman. I think maybe one of the things we typically may think about when we hear about this woman is that she was a prostitute. The text does not say, it just says who was a sinner. But we know that she had a reputation and that people knew about her in the city. And so this woman is being described here. And what's interesting, we don't find any words from this woman in this entire setting. All we find are her actions of what she's going to be doing in this setting, which I think is powerful because actions often speak louder than words. And so we know something about this woman. We know quite a bit. Number one, she was a sinner. That's what people understood about her, and that's what she was, according to the text, and as we get to the conclusion, because Jesus is going to forgive her of her sins. And when she learned that he was reclining at the table in the Pharisee's house, so this may have been more of a public kind of meal where the door would have been open, where she understands that this is where Jesus is. She evidently knows something about Jesus, and she's going in, and she knows where he is, and she's going to go directly to him. So when she learned that he was reclining at the table in the Pharisee's house, she brought an alabaster vial of perfume. And standing behind him at his feet, weeping, she began to wet his feet with her tears, and kept wiping them with the hair of her head, and kissing his feet and anointing them with the perfume. So we see this intense emotion of this woman and this interaction that she has with Christ. And for some of us, this may, feel a little bit uncomfortable with what she's doing. But she is demonstrating great emotion toward Christ. And Jesus is going to speak about this later on in the context where when he talks to Simon in verse number 46, he's going to remind him, when I came into your house, you did not anoint my head with oil, but she anointed my feet with perfume. And so she's doing some things that the Pharisee didn't even consider doing or think about doing. And so she's kissing his feet, anointing them with the perfume. Now look at verse 39. Now when the Pharisee who had invited him saw this, he said to himself, if this man were a prophet, he would know who and what sort of person this woman is who is touching him, that she is a sinner. So what do we learn about the Pharisee from this one passage here? What are we able to pick up about his mindset, his view of Christ? I see you nodding your head, brother. What are some things we can pick up?
Well, he surely doesn't think he's God.
Yeah.
He doesn't even think he's a prophet.
That's exactly right. Yeah, so there's some skepticism. He doesn't think he's a prophet, and obviously he is a prophet. He's going to demonstrate that. And he is God. He's God in the flesh, because Jesus knows what this man Simon is thinking. JD, you had your hand up too.
My thoughts already said.
Okay. Yeah, and also he didn't think that Jesus was going to know what he was thinking. Exactly, right? So he's going to get himself into trouble here, right? Where he's saying, well, if this man were a prophet, he would know who and what sort of person this woman is who is touching him, that she's a sinner. What else can we learn about this man?
He's aware of the little prostitutes.
What'd you say? So he's aware of this woman, and he is aware of her sins. Anything else that we can pick up regarding this man? Yes, ma'am.
He doesn't think he's a sinner.
That's exactly right. I think that's really what this is going to be driving at, right? So he has no problem seeing her sin. Everybody knows about her. But he's not considering his sin. Or if he is, he's considering, well, look how much worse she is compared to me. So you're exactly right. She's arrogant. Did I see another hand up? Yeah.
I'm just thinking about how the Pharisees seem to think that if one was a prophet or one was religiously minded, that there should be no contact with the sinner, that Jesus, if he were that type of person, would be defiled maybe by having a sinner in contact with him. And Jesus is over and over again showing that he came to seek the lost, not to keep himself apart from them.
That's exactly right. Yeah. There was this view, of how, prophets would interact with people. And yeah, Jesus is showing, this is why I came. I came for these people. And that's one of the things, talking to Nikki on the way here, we were just talking about, it is interesting how often he is eating with people, the tax collectors, the sinners. And when you think about evangelism, it's a great opportunity for us with interacting with people. Obviously, he's not condoning the behavior or engaging in the behavior, but there is this interaction that he has with these that are being looked down upon from others who are viewing them